Welcome to the Sheroes of Beijing Stories, the podcast series, brought to you by UN Women Nigeria and Women in Successful Careers, WISCAR. In this series, we would be sharing and celebrating stories of women's activism in Nigeria. The women in this podcast were present in the Fourth World Conference on Women, popularly tagged Beijing 1995. And their extensive and impactful experience and commitment to the empowerment of women is why we continue to celebrate them. At WISCAR, we believe in the power of a shared story in leading the next generation to aspire, grow, and contribute to nation building. We hope you will be inspired as you listen. Hello again. In this episode, I will be in conversation with Madame Amina Ladan-Baki. Amina Ladan-Baki is from Katsina State, Nigeria. She earned a BA from Ahmadu Bello University, postgraduate diplomas from Wales, Manchester, and Bayero Universities, and an MBA from Bayero University. She started her career as a civil servant and rose to Deputy Program Inspector, heading the Women Program Division responsible for executing programs that enhance women. She retired in January 1990 after accepting an appointment as Director General of the Directorate of Women Development. She later moved to the State Civil Service Commission in Kaduna State. Other positions held over the years include Pioneer Director of Programs at the Sir Ahmadu Bello Memorial Foundation, Commissioner in Katsina State Executive Council, amongst others. She is a member of several non-governmental organizations, including the National Council of Women's Societies, Baobab for Women's Human Rights, Women in Nigeria, among others. She has received many awards, including the National Honor Member of the Order of the Niger in 2004. She currently manages her own organization, Samdik Nigeria Limited, dedicated to improving other people's lives. So, Madam Amina Ladan-Baki, thank you so much for being in this conversation with me today. And I'd like to just go straight into the questions. I want to ask you, from reading the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, if you could just describe for us, your journey and how attending the Beijing conference shaped your journey in gender activism.
Thank you very much, Fabia. You're welcome. You know, as a civil servant, I was working under, community development initially. And then when the Department of Women Development was created, the department moved there. And throughout my life as a civil servant, I've been working on women participation in development, on the development of women's capacity. And going to Beijing just opened up everything, because it was such a unified, global gathering, all concerned with women development, seriously concerned with women development. You had women from all over the world. And what I found was most amazing was that our problems are common.
Yes.
Even in the developed society, there are some elements of what we're experiencing in our country. But to see, a group so devoted, so concerned, was really what made me really, really excited in appreciating for being there, to be part of it.
Yes.
And after that, all the issues that were, for example, the critical areas, you talk about women's poverty, education, health, violence against women, armed conflict, and so on. These are all issues that are relevant everywhere. And the most important, the starting point really, to me, is the girl child. How is she brought up? Who brings her up? The important role the women play in that, from conception, to adulthood. It's not an easy job.
That's true.
And anybody who is responsible for doing that cannot be undermined, cannot be regarded as a lesser human being because she's a woman. Because what she's performing there is tremendous. It's not easy. Can you imagine a baby from lying down to sitting up to crawling to walking to, you have to watch these levels of development one by one. And that kind of supervision needs patience, needs intelligence, which women have, which they have been applying. But when the child moves to adulthood, for example, to manhood, then he, a man, is being seen as superior to the woman who brought him up. You understand my point?
Yes.
So really, it's not right, So every single, you start with a girl child, and then of course there's the question of poverty. How do we alleviate poverty? People were united in stressing the need for education and training, and also women being aware of their situation and environment. Why, what can I do as a woman to improve my life? My job is not just to produce, but you have to be in a position at a later life where you can perform more roles in improving your society. And the critical areas have really summarized everything that needs to be done.
So did you find that, having those critical areas shaped essentially helped you to focus more when you came back from Beijing on the work you had already been doing?
It made me feel, the need to do a lot more. What I was doing is not enough. And one of the things that I think we really should have struggled in is to be in a position, in a decision-making position, so that we can influence policies, that favor women.
Yes.
Because, for example, even after Beijing, when the political system came back, there was only a handful of women in top positions. Okay, you have, let's say, about 50 minutes or 20 minutes, and then you select 2 or 3 as, and give it to women. And even in the political party system, women allow themselves to be demeaned. You don't aspire for any position, but you are given a position of woman leader. What's woman leader? Are you limited to just leading your kind?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you be the president or the secretary or the financial assistant? We have women working in banks. We have women working in civil service who are capable and able. But when the political system is set up, it is definitely discriminatory. They don't want to allow women to be in the position where they can, aspire to be governors, presidents, deputies, and whatever. Up to now, we don't have. How many women do we have? We have never had a vice president a woman. How many deputy governors do we have that are women? How many governors? None.
So if I can ask you, so what do you think we can do about that? What do you think? How can we shape that, and how can we change that from, in terms of our involvement in politics and in policy making? How do we move from having those sort of jobs that, like you said, limit us to our own kind, but rather sitting in the top seats and really being, in positions where we can drive from a more strategic perspective? What can change? What can we do better?
Well, of course, we have to, the idea of public enlightenment, advocacy, and so on. The women have to realize and appreciate themselves and to be convinced that they need to move forward, to stand for their rights, and to also insist on being heard and listened to.
Mm.
So I think a lot of the problem is because women accept what's in the status quo.
Yes.
What we need to do is to organize women, to group them, to be able to have a common voice, just like we did in Beijing. You understand? In arriving at our critical areas, it was a united action, a global move. But how do we apply that kind of procedure to our individual environment? For example, when I came back to Nigeria, why didn't we get, collectively organized women, sensitize them to believe in and to insist on getting their rights, even in political parties, in political institutions? Because that's what we're now in democratic situations, military regime. But what have women done, to ensure that they are heard, not just heard, but they are actually listened to? If you notice, Fabia, in any election, just watch any election, period, you'll find the majority of voters are women. They'll come with their children or pregnant. They even bring their calabash or stool to sit down because they insist on having that vote, selecting their favorite candidate. But then when the people get in, they forget us.
Yes.
We have to find a way of organizing women to stand up and to believe in getting their rights.
I hear you, Ma. So collective action, collective organizing, collective mobilizing is the key. And just to bring you to another sort of aspect which you touched on in the book and which I know you're quite passionate about, and that is empowering of the grassroots women. So I think this conversation so far has really been focused on, women in leadership and getting those top jobs in terms of government and, and policy making, to really be able to shape the narrative and change the game. But what about the woman at the grassroots? How do you think we can truly empower the grassroots woman such that she sees advocacy for women's rights translates to food on the table, to access to healthcare and a myriad of other empowerment measures, so that she herself can truly become an advocate rather than perhaps just seeing this whole conversation of, gender advocacy as for those who have, as we say in this part, belly full.
Actually, after Beijing, I was privileged to work with an NGO, the Ahmadu Bello Memorial Foundation. I was head of program then. And when I had that opportunity, I concentrated on entrepreneurship. Not just advocacy. Advocacy comes along. But I also concentrated on to develop and empower women, to develop the knowledge, skills, and competencies, as entrepreneurs. Because advocacy alone is not enough. You have to add something that will be of value to them. Develop their skills, potential. And, we have trained several women, for example, access to grants.
Yes.
Being able to develop a business plan that will be attractive to your donor. We only trained about maybe 2,000 women and some youth, across the 19 northern states. And I'm really glad because the women that we trained in entrepreneurship came from the local government, They were landowners, but they don't have the power over the land. It's a family land and they work there, from dusk to dawn. But theirs is just to labor.
Yes.
So we encourage women to insist on acquiring the land themselves and not just depend on what the family has, which is shared, but to be landowners themselves. And not to limit themselves to the basic method of farming or preserving. But look, they were introduced different, ways of preserving their grain, processing. There are a few, but, it gave me a lot of satisfaction in seeing women readily eager to come and learn.
And the programs were impactful. What would you say were the impact of running those programs? And are these things that you think we should keep on doing and, just keep on that track?
Well, I'm not there anymore, but when I left in my handing over, I insisted that we continue along this line. Gradually, because you empower one woman.
Yes.
Let's say to produce shea butter. Shea butter, like we did in Niger, is very, there are several ways of that you can use shea butter. And that woman engages an assistant, you understand, or another assistant, or her family, or her children. And they also learn.
Yes.
Even last week, they came with the pot that they had with shea butter. Another woman from Maiduguri You know, they have incense burning.
Yes.
They make their local perfume.
Mm-hmm.
They brought me some. This is what they've been doing. They have even learned to package and label. And these are people, you know, who are stationed where the ingredients for that kind of product is cheap and it's available. And they're taking advantage of it. Mm. And I'm so excited that, you know, I have, you know, influenced somebody to make to better their lives.
And so what happens, or, you know, what do you think is the ripple effect then of that? You know, the grassroots woman is empowered, her skills are built, you know, and then she's able to either own land in terms of the production process or, you know, use the new skills that she's acquired towards being a better entrepreneur. What does that do then in terms of the multiplier effects of this whole conversation that we're having, you know, around gender advocacy, equity? What does that then do for her?
Well, it should give her personal fulfillment and empower her economically.
Yes.
You know, because life is all about, you know, survival. And if you're able to survive on your own without leaning on somebody else, then it's an achievement.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully she can lift others up in the process.
Of course, you can lift others up.
Yes.
Because definitely there's always a tendency to have an assistant.
Yes.
You know? But the biggest problem in development that we're facing now, in self-development, is the issue of insecurity.
That was where I was coming to next.
That is something that we're coming to that later.
Yes.
But that's something that has to be surmounted before we can really record, you know, positive development.
Ma'am, when you speak of insecurity, you're talking about, you know, peace and, you know, you're talking about the issues of conflict and that, I suppose.
Yes, even in the women's song, what is emphasized? Security. Security comes first. Mm-hmm. But really, it should be peace. Peace, security, and development. Because if you don't have peace and security, development is slow. I'm not saying that it won't come, but you need to have the enabling environment.
That's right.
You have to have the environment that is conducive to your development. So how do we get security? Security is the responsibility, Fabia, of every single individual in the society. Okay? It's a primary function of government, securing people's lives and property. But who is the government? Who appoints the government? We're not in dictatorship. We're in a democratic setting. Do we understand democracy? Do we understand our role as democratic individuals? You know, Fabia, when I was a young girl in primary school in Katsina,
tell us, ma.
Parents had a say in what goes on in the school. There is no way you can see a teacher sitting under the tree while the class is on and he gives one child notes to copy on the blackboard. They will not take it. So it is happening now. The school was such an important, so crucial institution because that is where your best comes out. And it was not neglected. But our educational institutions now, I'm sorry to say, are neglected. They're not given the right attention that is required to move the country forward.
Yeah. So just
you get a child who can't even construct a sentence in his own language, let alone in English.
Yeah.
So whose responsibility is it? The public are seeing what is happening and they're not talking. The government, for whatever reason, is not performing as it should, and it is being allowed to do so. Because basically we lack the courage to be organized and to speak and to stand for our rights. Not just for women, but generally speaking.
Yes. As a society.
As a society, yes. As a society. Imagine you can elect a local government councillor or chairman. He lives in your village. He has the same kind of house that you have. Suddenly, his house is demolished. Another building is erected. All sorts of colors, all sorts of things that, you don't have and he never had.
He suddenly does.
And you don't question him. Where do you get the money to do, You just accept it. How long can we go on like this for? People have to learn to organize and speak and stand up for their rights.
So as I bring us to a short break, ma'am, I just want to, because you've said a lot, and I just want you to sort of emphasize what you're challenging us on. What are you challenging us as citizens, as NGOs, as CSOs, as the next generation perhaps coming up in this space of gender activism? What are you challenging us to do, especially in these areas that we've spoken about? We've spoken about more women participation in politics, getting those sort of critical roles that put us at the place where we can actually make active policy, working with the grassroots women to ensure that they themselves are empowered and can, have that mindset shift that's required to also own the space of lifting others up. And then finally, just that enabling environment of, peace and security so that we can actually do the work that needs to be done. What would you challenge us as NGOs and CSOs? Because as you said, government definitely has its part to play, but it's not all on government.
Yes, it's not all on government.
Yeah, so how do you challenge us?
Well, we as NGOs really are also limited. We are limited because we need, we can only struggle to sensitize people, women, to insist on being in a position to influence action, government policy. We have to develop the process of inclusion. Women need more presence in top policy decision making, both in the government and in the private sector. Specifically, in fact, essentially in the political party structure. For example, women must reject this position, like I said, a woman leader, because it is demeaning, it is limiting your capability, your capacity as a woman. Why are we having these conversations like you're saying? Because we're not there. Maybe we are not, we like the idea of, let's say, the Beijing Declaration be everywhere, women be involved, etc. But what steps are we taking to make sure those things are achieved? As NGOs are limited by funds, because ideally you have to be able to have advocacy right down from the grassroots upward, not just selection of women, and talk to them, and then everybody goes home. They have tea or drink or whatever. It has to be more than that. It has to be whatever advocacy the NGOs are going to do, it has to be linked with action.
Yes.
Not just talk.
Great.
Women should insist on being holding positions, and even in the position in the civil service, they have to talk. They have to be heard.
They have to speak up, Sorosuke.
They have to speak up, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
You have to speak up. You can't just sit there and accept things to come on a platter because you're a woman. I mean, it's not every woman can stand up for her rights because they have some fear of whatever. But it has to start.
Okay, ma'am. So I think this is a great place for us to take a short break. When we come back, we will speak a little bit more about your reflections in the book, and then we will bring our conversation to a close. So we'll just take a short break now, and we will be back in a minute.
The 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action flagged 12 key areas where urgent action was needed to ensure greater equality and opportunities for women and men, girls and boys. It also laid out concrete ways for countries to bring about change. UN Women works with governments and partners to ensure such change is real for women and girls around the world. Critical area of concern number 6, women and the economy. Whether in businesses, on farms, as entrepreneurs or employees, or through unpaired domestic or care work at home, women make enormous contributions to economies. Gender discrimination means women often end up in insecure, low-wage jobs and constitute a small minority of those in senior positions. To ensure that women can contribute fully and benefit from the economy, UN Women runs multiple programs for women's economic empowerment. We promote women's ability to secure decent jobs, own land, accumulate assets, and influence institutions and public policies, determining growth and development. We also work with partners to ensure that workplaces are free of violence and sexual harassment.
So welcome back. We're in conversation with Madame Amina Ladan-Baki, MON, and we're going to go back into our conversation. So, ma'am, I wanted to ask, obviously, the genesis of these conversations and these podcast series, and of course the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, was really because, we started the Intergenerational Mentoring Program for young women in activism and giving them the opportunity to essentially interact with women like yourselves who've obviously laid the groundwork and are still doing a lot of work in the gender activism space. I wanted to ask what you think the place of intergenerational mentorship is in moving this gender conversation forward, in moving the gender activism conversation forward.
Personally, I have a lot of belief in continuity.
Yes.
In fact, I will probably send you a piece of some write-up I did on continuity, on the importance of continuity. Because
fantastic.
It is what often developing countries neglect. They don't pay much attention to it. It's like every bird has its song. If this regime is over, another one takes over. It's like they draw a line and start building again. Mm-hmm. But when you look at Europe, they build on, and life goes on. So we really have to, the idea of the association of us, the elders and the young ones, is so that we can guide them and give them an insight. And luckily, there's a lot of documentation that you can advise them to read. Not just to read, but to read with the aim of understanding what is being said. Because you can learn a lot of lessons from the past. You can learn from the mistakes of the past, and then you ensure that you don't repeat them. Because progress is all really about a continuation of action. So I think really it's important that we have this relationship with the younger ones, and also they do the same to the ones that come after them.
Fantastic. Because, and I'm looking forward to that article, Ma.
I hope I can find it. Because it was when there was a transition between military regime and the political system, and we had a lot of arguments about, they had a lot of projects. For example, in the Better Life program, I was very much involved in it. This is, we used to have women development from the middle downwards.
Yes.
But then we had, a regime, the Babangida regime, and his wife felt that she wanted to, to do more for women. So you had it from top to bottom. And there was a lot of criticism because basically they didn't want women to develop, But it was the time that the women development really had a lot of boost because rural women were involved. We had trade fairs. We had training programs for them. And then after that, after Mariam Babangida regime went, it became, a routine thing now. Each head of state wife, each one of the head of state had her own program.
Her own pet project.
And that, in a way, has helped in bringing up women to the fore.
Yeah.
You have family support. And then when Mrs. Abdulsalam came, she is a lawyer by profession.
So
and she wanted to tackle the legal aspect of women development. And, I had the pleasure of being a board member of, Women Rights Amina Harapa.
Yes.
I'm still a board member, but a lot has been achieved, from that. Women's rights are human rights. And I think we have, these programs that we had from the top down have really helped in improving the position of women in Nigeria. And then, of course, we have various NGOs who also have performed well, like Baobab, like WIN, so many of them,
Yes.
So, young people have a lot to learn, no, not just from Beijing, but other developments after Beijing. In fact, Better Life came before Beijing, but then,
it was energized.
It's a continuation. It energized it, yes, So continuity is important. This relationship between the old and the young is very, very important. But I want you and to concentrate on documenting these issues, and making them available, at schools, to institutions, so that, people will be able to learn and understand that it's not a jamboree, a woman jamboree, that we're concerned with, but it is the development of women.
Yes. I like that
development,
very much.
Security and peace, yes.
I like the charge to document. I think that's definitely one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast series and why we embarked on the book, The Sheroes of Beijing. And definitely that is a theme that has come through even during the mentorship program. The importance, as you say, of continuity, which I think is very pertinent, and the importance of documenting for the next generation to give them a platform to learn from. So thank you very much for that. And as we wrap up this conversation, ma'am, I would like to refer to a quote which you gave in the book, The Sheroes of Beijing. You said, "What a woman can't do can't be done." And I think that's a very powerful quote. And I think it is a perfect summation of the fact that women are excelling, breaking barriers and bringing innovation in every sector, and we've touched on that during our conversation. So the question is, ma'am, as we close, if we're so competent and we have character and we have capacity, why are we still having these conversations? If it's there to be seen and it's been proven, why are we still fighting for equality in 2021? And what needs to change as we close?
Wow. What a woman can't do can't be done. It's true. It means it's so inclusive. I like the statement you made on it. We talk a lot. We have to be convinced as women to want to move forward, Fabia. A lot of it is, I think, if only we can unite and push, we'll be better off. But at the moment, we accept, like I said, positions of woman leader. When you should push your position to be the president or the vice president of the political party, why are you just limited to woman leader? It means if you're a woman, you're just there as an appendage. You're only relevant because they need your vote. And once they have that vote, and nothing happens. So why do women accept that? You see, it's our fault. Some of it. Some of the problem is caused by women themselves. We should insist on doing or holding positions. And when we are in this position of where decisions are taken at the top, we have to speak out and we have to insist on getting what is due for women to women. But because once you are united in the resolve, nobody can stop you. Okay, you want us to vote for you. What do you have? What program do you have for women? And even if you say you have program for women and you get there and you don't do it, there are methods of checking, behavior of leaders.
Yes.
Why don't we get engaged in that? You talk about democracy. When you open your mouth and start pointing out to the government its weakness, you are seen as a rebel. You're stripped away, by security agents, questioned, humiliated. Why? You see, Fabia, I think the problem we have, we like to say that we have, although democracy was imposed on us by our masters, but if it's not working for us, why don't we look for a way of making it work for us? Since the democracy is a global accepted, government process. But let us look at our peculiarities and find a way of, addressing those issues so it blends with the democratic process. I don't know, if only women can understand, can appreciate the power they have, there's no telling where we'll go. So recently, the Kaduna-Abuja road was impassable. I don't know if you
I
heard.
Because yes, ma'am.
Armed robbery, everything, hijackers, kidnappers, whatever. And a team of women, soldiers, were assigned to that route. Can you believe? You'll see them there. From the commander-in-chief to the driver, they're all women, parading up and down that road.
Amazing.
And we have peace. They're not just on the road, but they're in the bushes. They're performing. And they're women. So
amazing.
That is the military. We also have women in the police. Wherever you place women, they struggle. Well. They do well because they have to prove they can do it.
Yes.
Imagine with all this, we're surrounded by insurgents. We don't have peace, Fabia. How can you develop without peace? With insecurity. Security is the responsibility of not just the government. People have to be able to talk. When they see things that are wrong, they should be able to talk. And when they talk, they have to be protected. But it's sacrifice that we have to make.
Fantastic, Ma. And I think that's a great way. If I can just summarize, we've said so much, and I just want to make sure, everyone gets these points that you've spoken of in this conversation that we've had for, over the last 45 minutes or so. You've said, as women, we need to unite, and once we unite and are united, we are literally unstoppable. You said we should push to be more, and aspire to be more, and not limit ourselves to the roles that are handed over to us, but to really seek to hold the highest positions. And when we're in those positions, we must remember to speak out for women and to insist, our advocacy points and what it is that we stand for are heard. We must feel free to speak up, but also there is a duty, that we are owed to be protected as we speak up. And I think finally you said we need to look inwards as a country at the peculiarities of our own sort of political system and really find what works for us. And I think that on this note, I just want to say thank you so much, for being a part of the mentoring program, for being a part of the book, The Sheroes of Beijing, and again, for being a part of this podcast. And like I said, this is just the beginning of the work that you have said is important, which is to continue to document our stories, the stories of our Sheroes like yourself. And I look forward to receiving my copy of that book, of your article on continuity. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you.
I think we have to really work hard on hate speech of women. Find a way of, diluting it, discouraging it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Right. So thank you very much, Fabia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sheroes of Beijing podcast series. For more insights, follow us up across our social media handles. Follow UN Women on Twitter at UN Women Nigeria. Follow WISCAR on Instagram at WISCARNG and WISCAR Nigeria on Facebook and LinkedIn, or at Africa Business Radio.